I was going to comment on your what color is my parachute? I bought that book years ago, and I never thought of it as a practice every year to read it and evaluate yourself. So that's a pretty cool idea.
It doesn't change much year to year, but it is striking. Sometimes I'm thinking back, this is a while ago. I was a people manager. I had 6 people working for me. I was successful at it and people liked it, but I took the assessment and, you go through and you compare the things that you do all the way down the line. Would I rather work on a programming problem or deal with a people problem? Well, I really enjoy the programming problem more. And as I went through and answered questions like that, I realized that while I'm a good people manager, I don't really enjoy it the way I enjoy some of the other aspects of my job. And so there have been times when I've gone back and been a people manager, but primarily I've been an individual contributor since that time, once I had that revelation. So it's helpful to do an evaluation of yourself every now and again.
Thank you so much. Welcome to NSpeak, NVIDIA's Toastmasters Club. Everyone, please mute their mics. Let me introduce our MC for today. Devyani, it's all you.
Thank you, Abhijit. I'm Devyani. I'm going to be your host for today. For those of you who are not aware, Toastmasters is a public speaking forum where we practice our communication, leadership, and communication styles. We have our internal group at Toastmasters called NSpeak, and we meet once a week on Thursdays. So I'm sure everyone would agree with me, but when it comes to communication, 2021 has certainly not been ideal. Giving feedback has never been easy to begin with, and work from home has not made it any easier, where we are missing our constant peer interactions and feedback, which is why it's even more crucial to have these conversations and provide effective feedback to facilitate a better working environment for everyone involved. Our speaker today has given over 100 workshops and over 200 speeches. He is humorous speech district champion, and he is working extremely hard to fit his ego in the Zoom window. While he might look like Santa Claus, and in fact, he does play Santa Claus for San Jose's Christmas in the Park, Dennis Dawson is an irascible old curmudgeon. He has many opinions and he isn't afraid to share them. However, age has tempered his tone. He has learned some skills for giving useful feedback in a way where people are willing to accept. Please welcome Dennis with his presentation, Feedback in Workplace. Over to you, Dennis.
Thank you. And I would ask those who are on the call, if you're comfortable, please do turn on your video so that I can see your face. That way I know when you're bored, and I'll move on to the next topic. Because frankly, I was taken aback when I was asked to talk about giving feedback. I mean, what do I know? I know Stephen Covey or Daniel Pink or Kim Scott. And as I started going through all of the authors that I've been reading over the past few decades, I realized actually, I probably do know some stuff about how to give advice. Now, I'm a technical writer. I spent 5 years studying a language that I was practically born speaking. I'm a pretty good writer. Well, the thing is, everybody in business can read and write. And pretty much everyone thinks that they read and write well. And so giving them feedback on their writing is a delicate business. It's given me a lot of tools that I can use to give people feedback, not only so that it's honest and helpful, but also so that it's accepted. So let me share some of the highlights of my favorite resources for giving people feedback. And I'd encourage you to have your favorite note-taking advice. I have in my notes pen and paper, but I realize I'm old and I still use such things. But whatever you like to take notes on, because I'll ask some reflective questions that I'd like for you to jot some things down. Right now, if anybody's comfortable sharing, what challenges are you finding at NVIDIA today that brought you to this workshop? Why are you interested in giving more effective feedback? Yeah, Anita.
I am actually going through the harassment learning module and saw this on the calendar and said, oh yeah, you know what? This would go along with my harassment learning module. I should take it. So that's why I'm here. I figured a little more training around feedback would be helpful for that. If I do, as being in HR, you know, you encounter a lot of things, and just all the tools that you can have to be a more productive and more efficient and more compliant staffing person will just help the company. So.
I think it's fantastic that they have these workshops now in the workplace. In my day, you learned about sexual harassment by having people tell you to stop it. Well, that's a positive movement. Anyone else want to share what prompted? Is that Cynthia? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get. I'm here to learn how to provide feedback to someone who happens to be passive aggressive. And that's the challenge I have.
Yes, getting the open communication flowing is especially difficult.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, we'll have a couple of tips for how to work with that. Randall, you look like you want to say something.
Well, that's a really good perception of body English through the technical means. Congratulations on that. Yeah, I have the personal characteristic where I always want to jump into an interesting conversation, but I have learned that, you know, I have to hold my tongue a lot on these things. But thanks for calling on me. So I would just say that I have a distinction in my journey through NVIDIA of having worked at more Fortune 500 and startup companies than anybody I tend to meet when I work. And so it's very interesting to me how the different organizations express culture, express feedback, give rewards to the people they like. And so NVIDIA has been a very interesting journey for me in 9 years, quite inscrutable, much like an Asian wise man on a mountain who doesn't say anything. And so it's just interesting to hear people's perspectives. And I think anything people can do to learn feedback is going to contribute to their journey, whether they receive or give feedback. And I also like to support this particular group of public speaking, because I think if people speak better and have a better presence, then they will be able to give and receive feedback in anything they do better. And so I want to support this group. And so that's a little bit about my attendance today. Thanks.
That was terrific. One of the things I found very early in my career, in fact, I worked for Kelly Services as a temp. I did 60 different jobs over a 2-year period. And what I learned at that time is every place you go, you're going to find the same people. The faces change, but the personalities are pretty consistent as you go from place to place. And so while you always have to deal with individuals on a one-by-one basis, dealing with workplaces, actually, they tend to either nurture or people tend to find the place where their personality fits that niche. And you can learn the dynamics of organizations in general, but you have to deal with individuals individually.
Well, let me just respond and say that NVIDIA is really unique in a lot of ways. They have this amazing way of hiring and retaining that to me has made a unique culture. And so even though I see a lot of commonalities across the different places I've worked also, I find some very interesting uniqueness here.
I support your uniqueness, and I find that many companies are now finding that same uniqueness. as I go from job to job. Now, I'm going to start by talking about Toastmasters because Toastmasters brought me here. And this is where I actually practice my feedback on a week-to-week basis. The important thing in Toastmasters is to always use what we call I language. That's if you take away nothing else today, this is what you want to do. When I'm giving people feedback, I say, I saw, I heard, I felt. What I saw when you were speaking, what I heard, and what I felt as you were speaking. Now, the nice thing about I language when you're giving feedback is that you can never be wrong. If I say, you spoke too loud, well, that's a matter of opinion. And you're probably going to ignore what I have to say. But if you say, I found it difficult to listen to you because I was sitting too close, it was a little loud for me. Well, they can't argue with you at that point. And it makes it easier for people to take the feedback. You can also use I like when you're giving people positive feedback, and I wish. I wish you had spoken a little softer. Is easier to take than, shut up, that sort of thing. Now, when I'm giving feedback in Toastmasters, I use the sandwich method. I begin with two things that I liked about what the person had to say. Then I slip in, usually with a nice transition, into something that could have been better. If I say if I'm going to give them feedback that they spoke too loudly, I might start by saying how much I appreciated the dynamics, the different voices they used, their vocal variety going up and down the scale. But I would have appreciated it if you'd spoken a little more softly, because what I liked best about your speech, and that's where you slide in the thing that was most wonderful, is the content of what you said. It really touched my heart. So if you give that little wraparound so that people know that you appreciated things about what you've seen, that they could do better in some areas, in your opinion, and then you slide in the thing that gives them the best positive feedback, then they're much more likely to accept what you have to say. But it's important that you use the group dynamic whenever possible, because working as a group, we're always going to achieve more than we would if we were working individually, which is one of the strengths of Toastmasters. Now, way back in 1984, I was given a promotion. I was going to be made a manager in Arthur Young and Company. This was my first experience as a people manager. I decided, boy, I'd better learn something about how to be a manager. Made a huge mistake because I was moving from California to New York, and I read this book, The 1 Minute Manager. It was a big mistake because in California, we're rather new age, people oriented. In New York, it was a very different culture. But this still served me rather well. The 1 Minute Manager uses 1 minute techniques for how to work with your coworkers. Now, as a manager, you want to give people a 1 minute goal. You sit down and you write in 250 words or fewer exactly what you want the person to do. You're very specific about what the outcome of a particular project should be. You don't dictate how to get it done. We all know that you telling people how to do things is not the way to get them excited about their work, but tell them what results you're expecting to see when they're finished. It's nice and short, and they can always refer back to that 250-word description of exactly what you're looking for. Now, after that, you walk around and you watch, and you're always watching for when they do something well so that you can give them a 1 minute praising. You walk up to them, or of course on Zoom, you just get them on a Zoom call and give them specific feedback about what you appreciated about what they've just done. Talk about it in terms of, if you use OKRs, how did this contribute to your company's objectives and key results? So that they know that you're not just giving them empty praise, but you're praising something specific about something that has helped the company or helped you or helped themselves in their professional growth. If you're there in person, you can touch them on the shoulder. Yeah, I'm not even certain about that anymore, Anita. You'll have to tell me if that's okay. But You want to give a quick touch and let go, not to invade their personal space, but make a connection to let them know that you're giving them this approval, and pause a minute to let the praise sink in. Not a full minute, but pause to let it sink in that you've given the praise, and then you move on at that point. So it's something short that you do every now and again. Don't wait 6 months to give people positive feedback at their next review. You want to give it on an ongoing basis. This is also true of the 1-minute reprimand. This is where someone has done something that they shouldn't have done, and you want to address it the same way. Be very specific. Talk about how it's impacting the business, or how it's impacting you, or how it's impacting their professional growth. And give them this feedback on a consistent basis. Once again, after you've given them the feedback, you can give them a touch on the hand, on the shoulder, and give it a second to let it sink in. Look them in the eyes, and then move on. Don't keep coming back to that reprimand. Don't keep bringing it up. Don't bring it up in their 6-month review unless they've continued with that behavior at that point. The idea is to manage by walking around, and you want to catch people doing something right whenever possible. And this is a great way to motivate people. Now, some critics of the 1-minute manager say that it's the human equivalent of paper training. I disagree with that attitude. I think it's a wonderful attitude to take, that you're going to walk around, look for an opportunity to give people praise, and give it to them on a regular basis. Now, at any time, if anybody's got an example of how this is, how they've encountered this in their professional life, and you'd like to give a little anecdote, I love to hear that sort of thing. So feel free to type something in the chat. Abby will watch to see if I've got questions coming in the chat or comments. And yeah, I'd love to have you contribute in that way. And once again, if you're comfortable turning on your camera, I'd like to see your faces so I know whether I'm boring you. Another book that had a real impact on me way back in the 80s was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which of course 15 million sold, still in print. Primarily the book deals first with the skills that you need to be successful and independent. So you're going to be proactive about things, start with the end in mind, and you're going to put first things first. And when you do this, you become a successful, independent person. But then you move on to being successful in public. And these are the skills that are going to help you with your interpersonal communications. The most important one to me is to always seek first to understand before you seek to be understood. You want to be sure that you understand what the person is saying, what they're thinking, where they're coming from, before you try to give them your opinions and move them forward. 99% of the conflicts that you run into in the workplace come from a miscommunication. And if you can get people to tell you exactly what they think, and you listen to them, and you use reflective listening, that will resolve most of these conflicts that you run into. And I'm going to say more about that later on. Once you've understood the other person, you want to think in terms of how can I help them to achieve their goals while I'm achieving my goals. And I actually had to change this after something I saw in The Office, the comedy TV show, where they say you can't just think win-win, but you have to think win-win-win. How are you going to do something that helps yourself, that helps me, and helps the company to achieve its goals? And you want to look for those solutions that are going to help everyone achieve their goals across the way. We're all going to pull in the same direction if we think win-win-win. And then once you have the goals in mind, you synergize, because once again, we will always succeed together. We can do more as a group than we'll ever be able to do as individuals. Now, oh, that's right. I was going to build on that. There we go. Now, Here's the question. Covey is all about making yourself happy, having a happy, successful life. And I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. I know that most of you are working and you're listening with one ear. That's exactly what I would be doing if I were in a seminar like this. But I do want you to take 1 minute and write down the things that make you happy in this world. I'm going to give you a minute. Now I'll know it's a minute because I'm going to sing the Jeopardy song. Do, 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 do. Do 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 boom boom. Now, I'm going to ask Rebecca Toy. Rebecca Toy, what did you write down that makes you happy? See, I'm just picking names.
Hello. I wrote down my kids, talking with friends, budgeting, and personal finance. I'm so glad I did the homework.
Excellent. No, I love it. Anastasia.
Are you talking to me? Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm happy with any kind of adventures.
All right. Ankit.
Hi, sorry, I was on mute.
Uh-huh.
For me, I generally get happiness with my family and being content. So just no tension, free mind brings happiness.
And when you feel content, can you tell us of a time when you've had real satisfaction, real contentment?
Sorry, my PC keep getting
No.
weird. Some time ago, when my second son was born, right that moment, I felt really content that, I have a house now, I have a family, a loving family, and I have a job which I love. So that was feeling content for me.
And I knew we would get there because when we talk about the thing in life that makes us happy, that makes us feel content, makes us feel satisfied, of course, we have to start by saying our family, yes, my spouse makes me happy, my children make me happy. And all of that is true, not going to take away from it. But we think in terms of going on a vacation, that'll make me happy, or having nice things will make me happy. Drugs and alcohol are going to at least numb the pain to make me happy. Sex will make me happy. But the truth is, just what Ankit said, what makes us happy is meaningful work. When you think about something that has given you a real sense of satisfaction, something that makes you feel content, makes you feel good about yourself, you're going to eventually come down to something that you did on the job, something you did as a volunteer, some way that you have contributed to the world and made the world a better place. So, of course, I have a picture of Jimmy Carter up here. He had a questionable record as president, but he is certainly the most successful ex-president in the history of the United States. Not only is he very active with the Habitat for Humanity, he's, of course, started the Carter Foundation. They eradicated 6 diseases that I will try to pronounce here. Guinea worm, that one's easy. River blindness, trachoma, schistosomiasis, lymphatic filariasis, and malaria in Hispaniola. And he does this not by giving them drugs or sending in teams of doctors. He does it with education and simple, low-cost methods. And this is the legacy of Jimmy Carter, when he eventually dies, he's going to die a very happy person, satisfied with what he's done. But boy, he's hard to kill, isn't he? I admire that man a great deal. Now, Daniel Pink will tell you that the things that motivate us are three things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy means the ability to be self-directed and choose what you're going to do on a day-to-day basis. As you do the things you do, you get better at them and you continually improve your skills. And when you see the things that you do make a difference in the world, you have achieved a purpose in your life. If you're missing autonomy, mastery, or purpose in your current role, that's where your dissatisfaction is going to come. And when you're talking with your coworkers, think in terms of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. If you have a conflict, if you're giving them feedback on what they're doing, think about whether they've been given the autonomy to do the job well, whether they've been given the resources to master those skills, and whether they can see the value in the work that they're doing, and whether they feel appreciated for the work that they're doing. If you can nail one of these that's missing in the equation and give them some feedback on how it can help them achieve autonomy, mastery, and purpose, this is going to give you a chance to focus that feedback in an area that's going to be most helpful to them. Now, I have mentioned earlier, I just started a new job at Ripple, a cryptocurrency company. Am I excited about cryptocurrency? That's not why I took the job. I took the job because at my previous employer, I was not feeling autonomy, mastery, or purpose. I was very well paid, quite happy with my coworkers. The work that I was doing was really, really easy. Instead of writing, I was essentially editing the work of other people. If I had just kept my mouth shut and my head down, I could have stayed at that job for a very long time. But I wasn't getting any personal satisfaction out of it. It wasn't challenging, and it wasn't using the skills that I've spent a lifetime building. So when someone else said, hey, we'll give you more money, that's nice, but you come over here and we're going to give you much more interesting and exciting work, I made the jump. And you want to be sure that people are feeling the value in what they're doing if you want them to continue to be happy in the work that they do with you. Now, when you're giving people feedback, I said before, honesty is absolutely the key. And this is a fairly new book that I recently came across. This is by Kim Scott. It was named Radical Candor. This is where you're giving feedback in a way that is not just easy to understand, but you're actually giving people the direct, useful feedback that they need. I've seen this time and again, and this is true of my past employer. The feedback that I was given was always positive. Everybody said only nice things about my work, and everybody said nice things about everyone else's work. But sometimes I felt like the kid in The Emperor's New Clothes, where everybody after a trade show was saying, wow, that was just a fantastic presentation. And the person had gotten up there and stumbled, had trouble with the graphics. The people were walking out during the presentation, and everybody saying, hey, great job. That was fantastic. We really loved it. I didn't feel comfortable giving real feedback. Certainly I didn't do it in public. And the few times that I gave it in private, people were actually shocked. They were appreciative, but they had no idea that they had done so poorly because no one had ever taken the time to explain to them the things that didn't work in what they were doing. And so this is the whole idea behind compassionate candor. You want to be up in that upper right corner. Originally, she called it radical candor, but she changed that to compassionate candor, where you're giving people frank feedback, but you're doing it with love. Now, the other quadrants are the things that you need to watch out for. So if you don't have a caring relationship with the person you're giving feedback to, but you give them that hard-hitting feedback, you tell them exactly what's wrong, that isn't your compassionate candor, that's obnoxious aggression. And believe it or not, if you're not going to give compassionate candor, the second best thing is obnoxious aggression, because at least you're giving them the useful feedback at that point. Contrast that with manipulative insincerity in the bottom left quadrant. That's where you say, oh no, it was nice. It was nice. Or you don't say anything at all. And you let people go on to make whatever mistakes that they've been making. Up in the upper left quadrant, this is a problem in Toastmasters that we see very often, which is ruinous empathy. Giving people all kinds of love and care and support and never talking to them about the thing that they need to improve. Where you'll see this very often is when someone comes in and English isn't their first language, and they'll get up, they'll give a speech, and everybody will praise, oh, that was so great, it's so wonderful, you've appreciated your message, everything. But this person had real problem with their use of the article the, and putting the in front of too many words. Or they had a problem with pronunciation of certain words. Now, Abhi, I'm going to call you out. You had trouble saying cardiologist when you were giving a speech.
That's true.
Right?
Yes.
You gave the speech again and again, and nobody mentioned that to you. Who was the jerk who mentioned that to you, Abhi?
You.
Yeah, that's right. And so what did you do? You changed the word to?
Heart doctor.
Heart doctor instead of cardiologist, and suddenly everybody could understand him. The speech went along fine. And this is not because I think that Abhi is dumb, or because I think that I'm smarter than he is, that I'm better than he is, that my use of English is superior. It's because it was something that was preventing him from being successful. And I did it with care, I did it with love. And that's the whole trick to giving this compassionate candor. You challenge people directly and you tell them what they need to hear, but you do it based on a relationship that you've built over time, where you have trust, where you have respect, and you have affection for the person. And this is where we should all be pushing at any given time. So these are all things that I'm sorry?
Sorry, I think we have a potential question. Someone had
Yeah.
mentioned previously that when they give feedback, it comes across too strong. So how would you go about that? Is there any way to soften the blow? Or I guess that just comes through nurturing that kind of relationship.
So first of all, this is something you build up over time, and being able to give compassionate candor is not something you can just jump right into. So you want to establish a rapport, and you can do that. Again, it depends on the situation. If you're coming up to somebody whom you've never met after a particular presentation, you can ask them questions about what they've just done. People love to talk about themselves. This gets back to how to win friends and influence people. Give them an opportunity to share some other areas of their life, something beyond the presentation, something along that line. Look for a place where you can make a connection with them and make them feel comfortable. And again, to soften the blow, instead of saying, you really should have, it's, I enjoyed what I just saw. I enjoyed what you did, but I wish that it had been a little more whatever the thing is. And using the I wish is the best way to soften the feedback that you're giving to people out there. Is to, again, you're talking about your opinion and what makes you comfortable instead of telling other people what they should do. And that's probably the best advice I have there.
Thank you.
But yes, you do need to be sensitive to that, because it's the difference between being successful at giving the feedback and actually making the situation worse. Now, I have had situations at Toastmasters, somebody was going to give a speech, and I asked him what lesson he was working on from the Toastmasters materials. He said, "Oh, I'm not using a lesson. I'm just going to give a speech. I've done it before. It's okay." And he had that infamous yellow sticky in his hand with bullet points on it. And he got up and he gave a rambling speech. It was supposed to be 5 to 7 minutes. He only spoke for 3. And when it was time to give him his evaluation, I got up there and I told him exactly why I objected to it, that he had wasted a speech slot that other people could have used to advance in their lessons, that it was poorly prepared, that it had very little value to the club, which was shocking to the entire club. But then I turned to the club and I said, and I'm going to take you to task because you allowed this person to get up and give this speech, and you didn't give him honest feedback the last time he did it. And as a result, he felt that he was doing the right thing there. Now, you would think that this is going to make the club upset with me and everybody's going to give me a hard time about it. But actually what happened was I ended up becoming the president of the club. And the feedback I got was I had finally given them the shot in the arm that they needed to start being more respectful of the organization and start giving better feedback throughout. And I think you'll often find this is the case when you do it with sincerity, when you do it with love, but you give the actual critical feedback that's needed, people are far more receptive to it than you might think. So what do you do when it goes off the rails? When you have really made a mistake, you've offended somebody with the feedback that you've given. And that's when I go back to How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is Dale Carnegie. I believe this is 1940s. This book was first published. Absolutely as relevant today as it was when it first came out. The takeaway in this particular case is the first thing you do when you make a mistake, take the blame for it. I read this in the book and he had some interesting examples, but I saw it in action actually when I was working at Disneyland. I used to go and visit one of the performers in the Golden Horseshoe Revue, Fulton Burley, the Irish tenor. And while I was sitting in his dressing room talking with him, one of the drummers from the show came in. He said, "Fulton, I'm sorry, I asked you for 4 seats for the show, but they brought some friends. I actually need 8 seats in the next show. Can you talk with the concierge to get those people in?" So Foley pulls up the phone and he calls the main desk and he says, "Hello, darling. I made a mistake. I asked for 4 seats and I need 8. Could you possibly work it out for me that you get the other people in there? Thank you so much. Thank you, darling." Off he goes. Now, Fulton Burley had not made a mistake. And really, the drummer hadn't made a mistake. His friends had shown up with extra people that he didn't expect. But by getting on the phone and saying, "I made a mistake," by taking the blame, that takes all of the tension out of the request at that point. And the front desk was more than happy to accommodate them as a favor to Fulton. And of course, he was thankful, and anytime he could return the favor, he was happy to do it. When you take the blame, it takes the wind out of other people's sails, and it enables you to move past that and get on to a discussion of what really is the situation that you want people to deal with. One thing to watch out for is differences in gender, though. Now, this is a big generalization that I'm about to share with you. It's from the book, You Just Don't Understand Women and Men in Conversation, Deborah Tannen. Great book, really eye-opening for me. When you have a conflict between a man and a woman, very often it's a man who is saying something they think is innocuous, talking about some situation that has happened. Some project is late, something wasn't delivered on time, some element of the work is impeding progress, something along that line, and the man is upset about the situation. Men focus on situations. Women have a tendency to focus on interpersonal relationships. And so a man will be really angry about this situation that's preventing something from going forward and use very strong language about the situation, thinking that all he's talking about is this thing that went wrong. But if he's speaking with a woman, she may take it as a personal insult, that she's being attacked personally. Now, again, it's a generalization. Individuals are going to behave differently, but culturally, this is the way many of us are brought up. And it's not the situation that you have to walk on eggshells all the time, but being aware of this and watching for the signs when you're talking about a situation that's upsetting, and you see that the person you're speaking to is becoming upset, you can think about it, wait a second, let me be clear. I think that you're great and I appreciate your contributions to this project. I realize this isn't your fault, but we have a situation that needs to be fixed. You can change the tone, change the way that you're talking about something in a way that makes it easier for other people to accept the feedback. And this goes the other way as well, where you're trying to tell somebody, a guy, that he's being a jerk, and he's thinking, oh, it's just the situation. It's just the situation. No, Dennis, you're being a jerk. Sometimes we need to hear that as well. But very often, because we don't want to hurt Dennis the jerk's feelings, we hold back on giving Dennis feedback about something that he's done, something he's doing, some work he's done, even though I, Dennis, have thick armor and I'm desperate for someone to tell me what they really think about the work that I've done or the way that I'm doing it. And so it's definitely a very valuable read to go through, men and women in conversations. Yes. When I'm really, really wrong, though, it's important that I apologize. Now, can anybody think of a time when someone apologized to them or they apologized to someone else and the impact that it had on that particular relationship? Just curious. Think about a time when someone told you they were sorry, or you felt that you needed to tell someone you were sorry. Maybe jot it down. That's fine. This is a hard one to come up with. The important thing when you're giving an apology is that apologies always have 4 pieces, and you have to be certain that you give all 4. The first one is, I'm sorry because I did a specific thing wrong. And you notice I use the word specific all the time. This is the key. This is what I'm sorry for doing. And so it can't be, I'm sorry you felt bad. No. I'm sorry that you have a fat butt. No, you can't do that. That's not an apology. I'm sorry that I did a very specific thing that I shouldn't have done. It was wrong of me for these specific reasons. So not only do I acknowledge that I did something wrong, this is why it's wrong. This is how I have impeded impeded progress. This is how I have done harm to others. And in the future, I'm going to choose a different way of acting. I'm going to change my behavior. And by changing this behavior, I'm going to rectify the situation. Will you forgive me for what I did? Always ask for forgiveness as the 4th step. This is a complete apology. And if you leave out any element of that, people will appreciate it. You say, I'm sorry. Say you're sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, sure. You said you're sorry, but do you really mean it? Did you really learn the lesson? Have you really changed your opinion? No. Unless you've given all 4 of these pieces, it's not necessarily going to land the way that you hope it will. Conversely, when you give a complete apology in this way, it has a magical transformative quality that absolutely takes away the situation and becomes a positive place to grow. This is a way that you're going to build that trust between you and your coworkers in a way that a few other things are going to have such an immediate impact. One of the things I do is go in and draw with kids in the local 5th grade. I don't say I teach them drawing. I bring in drawing lessons. I draw with the kids. We have a good time. I'm like grandpa. I get them all excited and sugared up. And then after 15 minutes, I run away and the teacher has to deal with all of their enthusiasm. And that's the way I like it. But sometimes the kids get a little rambunctious while I'm teaching. And I explain to them early in the year, look, I don't get paid to be here. I'm a volunteer. If you upset me, I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to punish you. I'm not going to send you to the principal's office. When you're too rambunctious, I will walk out. And then only once in 20 years has it gotten to that point. That kids were just being kids. They're just having a good time. But one particular kid had to say something after every single thing I said, and he wouldn't be quiet. And it just got to be too much for me. So I stopped drawing and walked out of the class. And the next time I saw them, the teacher said, "Tell Mr. Dawson you're sorry." Everybody said, "We're sorry." And that's when I gave them this lesson on the 4-step apology. And I took them through it, and I had them say what they were sorry for, why they felt it upset me, how they were going to change the behavior. And I had them ask if I would forgive them. Of course I forgave them. And once again, that built a very strong bond with that particular class. And I still hear from those kids years later where they talk about how much they enjoyed the drawing class. And I cannot say enough about the power of a sincere apology to eliminate friction in the workplace. Sometimes the apology is not enough. And that's when you pull out the big guns, crucial conversations. When things get real, you're going to have a serious talk with another individual. And what you want to do is find a neutral space to have this particular discussion. See, there's going to be a certain amount of preparation and ceremony involved here in order to have a real, honest conversation about something that's terribly difficult. So you go someplace comfortable. Usually I'll go to a conference room on a different floor than either of us sit on, if possible. You want to make it as safe as possible for both parties. So it's not going to be recorded. It's not going to have someone sitting there in judgment, although if it's really tense, if there is someone both of you trust, like a mutual manager, something along that line, you can have them in the room to help you with it. And you're going to use that reflective listening. Now, this is how I've done it. And I promise you, once again, this is magical. When you have a real conflict, it's because people believe they're not being listened to, that you're just not hearing them. And so what I will do is ask this person with whom I'm having a disagreement, tell me everything that is upsetting you about me. I want to know everything. And I will stand there with a whiteboard marker and make a bullet list as they tell me everything I have done to get them upset. Very often it's a long list, maybe 5, 6, 7 items that they object to the things I do. Most of them are pretty minor, but there's usually one that's the crux, of course. But what I do is I write that bulleted list. I take notes. And as soon as they're finished dumping everything out that is upsetting them, I go back through the list and I repeat everything back to them in my own words. I don't just say exactly what they said. I interpret it and say it in my own words so that they know not only did I hear it, but I actually grasped what they were trying to say, and I have internalized it to the extent that I can express it in my own words. If I get something wrong, I let them correct me until I have got that list absolutely right. Then we turn the tape.
What about in this world of Zooming? I mean, I've worked remotely most of the time I've worked at NVIDIA. And things, my manager will tell me I need to have a weekly meeting with so-and-so because we're not getting along. But it's always tense and it eventually just gets dropped. And so, but it's always been over the phone or now with Zoom.
Well,
just wonder how that changes.
That's a really good question. So the first of all, if they happen to be in the same physical, same city, what have you, we are able to get together for coffee at this point. You can meet at a Starbucks, something along that line, if that actually works out. But your question is, how can you do it over Zoom? One of the things you can do, believe it or not, is go to Google Meet or something other than the regular Zoom program. Again, you're going to this neutral space that is new to both of you, and that can have an impact on it. If it's going to be in Zoom, you can do bizarre things like have the same background, use a company background so that both of you seem to be in the same spot. But then what you can do is either use the annotation feature of Zoom, or you can go out to a mural board and use that instead of the whiteboard. Mural is an online program where you can sort of share sticky notes out there. And there are others that are like that, where you can fill out sticky notes and put together a board. You could do that simultaneously, for example, and put all the stickies up there. But then you have one person go all the way through all of their stickies, and then you repeat back to them what they said. Then you bring them to your board or your side of the board and go through all of your stickies and have them do the same thing. Repeat to you exactly what you said, but in their own words. I will tell you that I have been through this process perhaps 5 times in my professional career. Every single time it's been in person, but every single time it ended in a hug at the end. That not only did we find that communication, but we found a real bond once we really understood one another. Because really, that's the crux of it, is the misunderstanding. It's not a judgment generally about a person or their personality or their being, but a problem with not feeling like you're being heard. There. Did I answer that at all, Lars? Or?
Yes, that's great. That's a big help.
Okay, thank you. Yes, now, one of the things that'll happen in these conversations, people get into their amygdala, right? That's the walnut-shaped thing in the back of your brain that does the fight or flight thinking for you. That's when they get defensive or they get aggressive. They call it silence or violence. So they're either going to clam up and not want to talk with you, or they're going to be very aggressive and they're going to start shouting, what have you. When people are in those modes, you want to get them out of the amygdala and into the prefrontal cortex. Okay, that's up here. Now, to get somebody immediately into the front of their brain, the rational piece, all you have to do is ask them a question. Any question at all. It doesn't matter what the question is, but the amygdala cannot handle questions. So you can just ask them, why are you feeling that way? How does that impact you? What can I do to make it better? Any question along that line immediately snaps them out of the silence or violence response and forces them to use the front of their brain. Even if they're still silent, if you wait and then ask another question, you're going to force them into the rational part of their brain. They'll relax and they'll be able to respond in more socially acceptable way at that point. So that's some of the stuff that I've learned over the years from these books. And there are always so many wonderful books about management, about interpersonal relationships out there. In fact, if anybody has some suggestions for further books, I'm going to incorporate them into my next talk and pretend that I was the one who came up with it. So I'd love to hear other resources that you've used that you have found helpful in any of these areas that I've covered today. And any additional questions? That was a great question from Lars.
I will break the silence. I am Shri. I know Abhijit very well. Thanks for someone invited me to this. I took a chance, was attending this meeting. Dennis, one thing, I've been at this company for a long time, so I have to share something. It's a very unique company where there's a lot of diversity. So people, you gave great suggestions. Thank you. But the diversity factor also, if people don't know about other cultures and their, so it also, if you don't know much, it also encourages prejudice about the other cultures. So, and thanks to the internet world, people read a lot about other cultures, but I don't think the internet encompasses every detail of the other cultures, right? So that also makes things complicated in communication. So yeah, that was my input. Thank you.
That's really good input. And I need to continually be checked on my white privilege, because anybody who doesn't believe in white privilege isn't paying attention. It's something that I have only very recently started to come to a reckoning with, that my prejudice is a white person problem and not the problem of other cultures to resolve in relation to me. One of the things that I have noticed recently, in fact, is that there is a hierarchical style of management in other cultures that here in Silicon Valley, certainly we kind of buck against, where we fight back against the notion that a manager tells you what to do. Whereas this is not necessarily something that is universal in the world, where managers actually feel like they do have to tell people exactly what to do. And it can create a huge amount of friction within California culture. And so getting past that requires frank discussions, sometimes with people who are superior to you, people who determine whether or not you get a raise. And it's something that needs to happen. But as Sri is suggesting here, it really has to come from a standpoint of two people who want to understand each other better, and not from someone who's trying to tell other people or expect others to change their behavior just because they're in Silicon Valley, just because they work for a particular company. So that education, again, anybody but a privileged white male is living it. And so they get to, they understand the experience. And it's us privileged white males that need to learn to correct our own behavior over time. That's the only way it's going to change.
Thank you, Dennis. There is another question. How to handle rough and subjective feedbacks, by Padma Lata.
The wonderful thing about rough and suggestive feedback is, and I've actually, again, Abhi, you know that I have that mantra, this person is doing the best they can at their current level of development. I like to use that because it lets me feel superior to the person in a smug little way, but it also encourages me to be more empathetic. And so why is this person giving me this feedback? What is it in their life that is causing them to lash out this way? How can I help this person to be better at giving feedback? And the way you can do it is through reflective listening. Say, you've just given me some really harsh criticism on this. Help me to understand how I could have done it better, what I should have done differently. And then once again, listen to them and say it back to them. You don't have to agree with what they're saying. If they're your manager, then you're going to have to change what you do. And that could either be you decide that you're going to follow along with the manager's guidance, even though you disagree with it, you disagree and commit to continue to work, or you choose not to do it and you find another job. You find another place to work. But do it based on mutual understanding. And again, the best way to get that understanding is through reflective listening, through being very clear with them what you're hearing, and be sure that what you're hearing is what they're trying to say. Very often then, as you start getting into that rough and harsh criticism, they're going to temper it down because they're really upset about something very specific and not in general the way it sounds when they first start talking.
Thank you so much, Dennis. There's another question by Lily. Lily, do you want to ask him directly?
Sure, I can. I realize this is probably a bigger topic and we probably don't have time to discuss it, but I would be really interested to hear how to facilitate these types of conversations between two other people. As a manager, I've been in many situations where there have been conflict between two employees and I need them to apologize to each other and to give each other feedback in a way that they can be receptive and actually hear each other out. And sometimes it's gone well and sometimes it resulted in one person storming out. And so I would love to hear about how to be a better mediator under those circumstances as well.
Yeah, generally the mediation, first off, this is not something you want to try without having some experience or background or reading some of these books. And the best one for mediating a tense situation like that is Crucial Conversations. So if it's a real issue, in fact, at NVIDIA, there are some great people you can bring in who will do day-long seminars on crucial conversations that are really beneficial. I attended one of those, and that's why I use those techniques fairly often. But definitely read the book. And it talks
Yeah,
about,
I have. It was a really great book. I loved all of the different examples they walked through, and I definitely use it myself when giving feedback to others. But maybe I need to look back through it to see the sections that are pertaining to mediation.
yeah, and don't be coy about it. Say, we're going to come in here, we're going to go through a little bit of ceremony. We're going to have a little bit of circumstance around this, where we are going to actively work on listening to one another in a respectful way. And the techniques we'll use are as follow: 1, 2, 3. If you're trying to finesse it and fool them into following Crucial Conversations techniques, that's when they're going to mistrust you.
Okay.
So just be real open about what you're trying to do.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I do have a hard stop at this point. Happy to have other conversations with anybody or answer questions. Let me put my, where's everybody? There's everybody. I'm going to put my email address. tmdennisdawson@gmail.com. Happy to have conversations about this with anybody on an individual basis. And again, thank you so much for having me. This has been a great pleasure for me.
Dennis, this was
Thanks so
fabulous.
much, Dennis.
Thank you,
This was
Dennis.
really great. Thank you. Thank you for picking the meat of all these crucial classic books and summarizing in a perfect way. We also have the session recorded, so for anyone to recap or feel free to share this And thank you for your time, and thanks everyone for your questions as well.
Bye for now.
Thank you, Dennis.